"You don't need to come, Daddy. We will provide you with a big screen to watch the wedding from home. People will laugh at me because my dad is handicapped." Those words hit me like a freight train, crushing every breath from my lungs. I sat there in my wheelchair, phone pressed against my ear, staring at the framed photograph on my desk. My daughter Sarah at her college graduation, beaming with pride as she held her diploma high. The same diploma I had sacrificed everything to help her earn. My name is Barack and I'm 58 years old. For the past 30 years, I've built a successful import business from the ground up, turning a small storefront into a company that employs over 200 people. But in that moment, listening to my only child tell me she was ashamed of me, none of my achievements mattered. The man who had negotiated million-dollar deals, who commanded respect in boardrooms across the country, felt smaller than he ever had in his life. I've been in this wheelchair for 12 years now. A drunk driver changed my life forever on a rainy Tuesday evening in March. But I never let it define me. I adapted, I overcame, I thrived. What I couldn't adapt to, what I couldn't overcome, was the realization that my daughter saw me as nothing more than an embarrassment. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely steady, "is that really how you feel about your father?" "Dad, you know I love you," she replied, but her tone was distant, rehearsed. "It's just that Michael's family is very traditional. They come from old money and appearances matter to them. I don't want anything to overshadow our special day." Michael, her fiancé of 8 months, a man I'd met exactly 3 times, each encounter more uncomfortable than the last. He looked at me the way people look at broken things, with a mixture of pity and discomfort. And apparently my daughter had started seeing me through his eyes. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my office, surrounded by the evidence of a lifetime of hard work. Awards lined the walls, certificates of achievement, photographs with mayors and business leaders. But what good was any of it if my own flesh and blood was ashamed to have me witness the most important day of her life? The memories came flooding back as they always did when I felt this hollow ache in my chest. Sarah at 6 years old, climbing onto my lap while I worked late into the night, asking me to read her just one more story. Sarah at 16, crying about some boy who had broken her heart, and me promising her that someday a man would love her the way she deserved. Sarah at 18, hugging me tight as we stood outside her college dormitory, whispering "Thank you, Daddy" in my ear. I had given her everything. When her mother left us, she couldn't handle the adjustment after my accident, she said. I became both parents to Sarah. I worked 16-hour days to pay for her private school education, her tutors, her music lessons. I sold my classic car collection, the one thing I'd kept for myself, to cover her college tuition when the scholarship money wasn't enough. I remember the night I made that decision. Sarah was home for winter break, stressed about finances, talking about dropping out and getting a job. I watched her sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by bills and loan applications, her dreams slipping away. That night, I called every collector I knew and sold every vehicle, my 1967 Mustang, my father's 1955 Chevy, cars I'd lovingly restored with my own hands before the accident. The money went straight into her college fund. She never knew. I told her I'd found another scholarship program. When she graduated summa cum laude, she thanked God and her professors in her speech. Not once did she mention the sacrifices that made it possible. After graduation, when she struggled to find work in her field, I quietly arranged an interview at one of my client companies. When she needed help with the down payment on her apartment, I transferred the money without hesitation. When she wanted to pursue her master's degree part-time, I covered the costs. Every time I told her it was a loan, and every time I never asked for it back. I loved her enough to swallow my pride, to make her believe she was independent and capable, when in truth, my financial support had been the foundation beneath every step she took. I wanted her to have confidence, to believe in herself. I never imagined that confidence would grow into something that excluded me. Now, as I sat in my office that evening, I realized I had failed her in the most fundamental way. I had given her everything except the understanding that love and support come with respect and gratitude. I had taught her to take but never to appreciate. I had shown her that my love was unconditional, and somehow she had interpreted that as meaning it was expendable. The wedding was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to watch the final transformation of my little girl into someone I no longer recognized. 3 weeks to accept that I had raised a daughter who was ashamed of her father. But as the days passed, something else began to grow alongside my heartbreak, a cold, hard resolve. I had spent 12 years proving that disability doesn't diminish a man's worth. I had built a business, maintained my dignity, and carved out respect in a world that often overlooks people like me. I wasn't going to let anyone, Not even my own daughter reduced me to an object of shame. I made a phone call to Thomas Hartwell, my attorney and friend of 25 years. Tom had handled all my business affairs since the early days, and more importantly, he had drafted my will years ago, a will that left everything to Sarah. My business, my investments, my life insurance policies, the house, everything. It was all intended for her, a final gift from a father who wanted to ensure his daughter never wanted for anything. Tom, I said when he answered, I need to make some changes to my estate planning. We met the following morning in his downtown office. Tom's expression grew increasingly concerned as I outlined my intentions. I wanted to revoke Sarah's inheritance entirely. Every share of stock, every property deed, every bank account. I was removing her name from all of it. Barack, are you sure about this? Tom asked, his pen hovering over his legal pad. This is your daughter we're talking about. Whatever argument you've had, surely. It's not an argument, Tom, I interrupted. It's a revelation. I've spent 12 years believing that love alone was enough, that providing for her financially was the same as teaching her values. I was wrong. She doesn't need my money if she doesn't want my presence. I instructed him to establish a charitable foundation instead. The Barack Foundation for Disabled Veterans would receive the bulk of my estate, men and women who understood sacrifice, who knew what it meant to adapt and overcome. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was leaving my fortune to strangers who had never asked for my help, while taking it away from the daughter who had always expected it. But I wasn't finished. I had one more request that made Tom's eyebrows shoot up toward his hairline. I want you to read the new will at her wedding, I said. Barack, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. She wants to exclude me from her special day because I'm an embarrassment? Fine. But she's going to learn exactly what excluding me costs. Tom tried to dissuade me, talking about family relationships and the finality of such actions. But I had made my decision. If Sarah wanted to treat me like a stranger, then she would inherit from me like one. The following weeks passed in a blur of legal preparations and emotional turmoil. I went through the motions of my daily routine, meetings, phone calls, business decisions, but my heart wasn't in it. Every night, I sat in my study looking at photographs of Sarah throughout the years, wondering how we had arrived at this point. I thought about calling her, trying one more time to bridge the gap between us. But every time I reached for the phone, I remembered the dismissiveness in her voice, the casual cruelty of her words. People will laugh at me because my dad is handicapped. As if everything I had accomplished, everything I was, could be reduced to my wheelchair. 3 days before the wedding, Sarah called me. My heart leaped. Perhaps she had reconsidered. Perhaps she wanted her father there after all. Dad, I wanted to make sure you got the information about the live stream, she said. The wedding starts at 4 and we'll have the camera set up so you can see everything clearly. Of course, I managed. I'll be watching. Good. Oh, and Dad? Thank you for understanding. I know this isn't easy, but it really is for the best. For the best. As if my absence from my daughter's wedding could ever be for the best. As if the gaping hole where a father's love should be could somehow improve her special day. I hung up and called Tom immediately. Is everything ready for Saturday? Yes, he said quietly. But Barack, it's not too late to. It's been too late for a long time, Tom. I just didn't realize it. The morning of the wedding arrived gray and overcast, matching my mood perfectly. I dressed carefully in my best suit, navy blue with a silver tie, the same colors Sarah had chosen for her bridesmaids' dresses. If I was going to attend my daughter's wedding uninvited, I was going to look worthy of the occasion. My driver, Marcus, helped me into the car with his usual efficiency. He had been with me for 8 years and knew better than to ask too many questions when I was in one of my dark moods. The Belmont estate, sir? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Yes, Marcus. And we're not leaving until the very end. The Belmont estate was exactly the kind of venue I would have expected Michael's family to choose, sprawling, expensive, and dripping with old money pretension. As we drove through the gates, I could see the carefully manicured gardens and the elegant pavilion where the ceremony would take place. It was beautiful, I had to admit. Sarah had always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, and this certainly qualified. Marcus parked near the back of the lot, and I transferred to my wheelchair with practiced ease. The other guests were already making their way toward the ceremony site, dressed in their finery, chattering excitedly about the beautiful couple and the perfect day. I recognized some of Sarah's college friends, a few distant relatives, and what I assumed were members of Michael's extensive family. None of them recognized me. I positioned myself at the very back of the seating area, partially hidden by a large floral arrangement. From here I could see everything. The altar decorated with white roses and baby's breath, the string quartet tuning their instruments, the nervous energy of the groomsmen as they took their positions. And then the music started and my breath caught in my throat. Sarah appeared at the end of the aisle and for a moment I forgot everything, the hurt, the anger, the betrayal. She was radiant in her wedding dress, a vision of beauty that made my chest swell with pride despite everything. This was my little girl, the child I had held in my arms on the day she was born, the teenager I had comforted through heartbreaks, the young woman I had watched grow into someone extraordinary. But as she walked down the aisle, her arm linked through Michael's father's, because of course his father would walk her down the aisle instead of her own, I felt the final piece of my heart break. She had found a replacement for me even in this most sacred moment. I watched the ceremony with tears in my eyes, seeing my daughter promise her life to a man who looked at her like she was a prize he had won. When the officiant asked if anyone had any reason why these two should not be wed, I remained silent. This wasn't about stopping her wedding, it was about reclaiming my dignity. After the ceremony, as guests moved toward the reception pavilion, I made my way to the front. Several people looked at me curiously. Who was this man in the wheelchair? But no one approached. I found Tom near the entrance to the reception, looking uncomfortable in his formal attire. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready for weeks," I replied. The reception was in full swing when Tom stood up and tapped his champagne glass with a fork. The sound cut through the chatter and laughter, drawing everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I apologize for the interruption, but I have some important business to conduct on behalf of Mr. Barack Williams." A murmur went through the crowd. Sarah's face went pale as she spotted me for the first time, sitting at a table near the back of the room. Her mouth fell open in shock. "Daddy?" she whispered, though her voice carried in the suddenly quiet room. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer. Instead, I nodded to Tom to continue. "I am Thomas Hartwell, Mr. Williams' attorney," Tom said, pulling out a legal document. "Mr. Williams has asked me to read his updated last will and testament, which was executed this week." The silence in the room was deafening. Michael stood up, his face red with indignation. "What is the meaning of this? This is our wedding." "The meaning," I said, finally speaking for the first time, "is that my daughter told me 3 weeks ago that I didn't need to attend her wedding because people would laugh at her handicapped father. She was embarrassed by me. So I thought it was important that everyone here understand exactly what that embarrassment costs." Sarah's face crumpled. "Daddy, I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you said," I interrupted. "And I heard you clearly." Tom cleared his throat and began to read. "I, Barack Williams, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and testaments. To my daughter, Sarah Williams Thompson, who has made it clear that my presence in her life is an embarrassment, I leave the sum of $1, to be paid within 30 days of my death." Gasps echoed throughout the room. Sarah let out a sob and started toward me, but Michael grabbed her arm. Tom continued reading. "The remainder of my estate, including my business, all real property, investments and personal effects, valued at approximately $12 million, shall be donated to the Barack Foundation for Disabled Veterans, to be used for housing, medical care, and job training for veterans who have given their bodies in service to their country." The room erupted in whispers and shocked exclamations. Michael's family looked horrified. Clearly, they had expected Sarah to bring significant wealth into the marriage. Sarah herself was crying openly now, reaching toward me with desperate hands. "Daddy, please," she begged. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please don't do this." I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew might be the last time. She was still beautiful, still my little girl somewhere underneath the woman who had chosen appearances over love. But it was too late for apologies. "I spent 30 years giving you everything I had," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "I sold my most precious possessions to pay for your education. I worked extra hours to cover your expenses. I sacrificed my own dreams so you could chase yours. I did all of this because I loved you and because I believed that love was enough." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle over the assembled guests. "But love without respect is worthless. Sacrifice without gratitude is meaningless. I taught you that my love was unconditional, but I failed to teach you that it still had value. Today you learn what it costs to throw away a father's love." Sarah fell to her knees beside my wheelchair, clutching at my hands. "Please, Daddy. I'll do anything. I'll call off the wedding. I'll make this right." For a moment, looking down at her tear-stained face, I almost wavered. This was my daughter, my only child, begging for my forgiveness. But then I remembered the casual dismissal in her voice 3 weeks ago, the way she had reduced me to nothing more than a source of embarrassment. The time for making it right was 3 weeks ago, when you chose your embarrassment over your father's love, I said gently. This isn't punishment, Sarah. This is consequence. And sometimes consequences are the only way we learn what really matters. I signaled to Marcus, who had been waiting near the entrance. He approached with my coat, and I began to transfer my wheelchair toward the exit. Wait, Sarah called after me. Where are you going? You can't just leave. I turned back one final time. I'm going home to watch your wedding on the big screen you provided for me. After all, that's where you wanted me in the first place. The drive home passed in silence. Marcus knew better than to offer empty words of comfort, and I was grateful for his understanding. When we arrived at my house, the house I had bought with Sarah in mind, with her future family in mind, I went straight to my study and closed the door. I didn't turn on the live stream. I didn't need to see any more. Instead, I sat in my wheelchair, surrounded by the photographs and memories of a lifetime spent loving someone who had ultimately found that love insufficient. The anger was still there, burning in my chest, but it was mixed now with something else, a strange sense of peace. For the first time in 12 years, I had stood up for myself. Metaphorically, of course, but the feeling was the same. I had refused to accept being diminished, refused to allow my disability to be used as an excuse for exclusion. I had reclaimed my dignity, and that was worth more than any relationship built on shame. The phone rang several times that evening. Sarah, no doubt, trying to fix what she had broken. I didn't answer. There would be time for conversations later, if she truly wanted to understand what she had done. But today was not that day. I thought about the veterans who would eventually benefit from my estate, men and women who understood what it meant to sacrifice, to adapt, to overcome. They would use the money to build better lives, to support their families, to create something meaningful from their struggles. My wealth would serve a purpose greater than simply enabling someone who had forgotten its value. As the evening wore on, I found myself thinking not about what I had lost, but about what I had gained. I had learned that I was stronger than I knew, that 12 years in a wheelchair had not diminished my ability to command respect. I had discovered that love, real love, requires mutual dignity, and that I deserved better than being hidden away like a shameful secret. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is to let them face the consequences of their choices. Sarah would have to live with the knowledge that she had chosen momentary social comfort over a lifetime of her father's love. She would have to explain to her children someday why their grandfather left his fortune to strangers instead of to their mother. She would have to carry the weight of that decision for the rest of her life. Perhaps that weight would teach her something I had never managed to teach her myself. That love is precious precisely because it can be lost. Late that night, I made my way to the bedroom, exhausted by the emotional toll of the day. As I prepared for sleep, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror, a 58-year-old man in a wheelchair, but with something in his eyes that hadn't been there in years. Strength. Self-respect. The quiet confidence of a man who had finally learned to value himself as much as he valued others. I had spent 12 years learning to navigate the world from a wheelchair. Tonight, I had learned to navigate something far more difficult. The world of relationships where love alone is not enough. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new decisions about how to move forward. There would be lawyers to meet with, foundation paperwork to file, perhaps even conversations with Sarah if she was ready to have them honestly. But tonight, I would sleep peacefully, knowing that I had finally stood up for myself in the way that mattered most. I had taught my daughter the most valuable lesson I could give her, even if she was too late to benefit from it. I had shown her that every person, disabled or not, father or stranger, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And I had proven to myself that I was worthy of both. The last thing I did before turning off the light was to remove Sarah's graduation photo from my nightstand. Not in anger, but in acceptance. Some chapters in our lives have to end before new ones can begin. And as I drifted off to sleep, I found myself curious about what the next chapter might bring. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid of finding out.